All right, today we're cracking open a pretty unique case file. We're going to do a deep dive into the tenure of one of the most unpredictable public figures you can imagine, Secretary of Defense Harold P. Mumblesworth. We're going to analyze his, let's call it a singular approach to national security, a style we've dubbed strategic chaos, by looking at two specific and frankly unbelievable incidents.
And yeah, right out of the gate, this quote, it tells you pretty much everything you need to know. It's the perfect little window into the one-of-a-kind logic of the man we're talking about today. Just keep this in the back of your mind as we go, because it's kind of a guiding principle for everything that follows.
So who exactly was Secretary Harold P. Mumblesworth? Well, as head of the U.S. Department of Defense, his mind was, let's just say, it was a fertile ground for ideas that most people would call unconventional. I'm talking about actual proposals for submarines with wheels, a defense system based on dolphins, and even training eagles to snatch enemy drones out of the sky. His time in office was, well, it was anything but dull.
So this is basically his playbook. He might have been the Secretary of Defense, but his methods were more like a Silicon Valley disruptor than a Pentagon official. He genuinely preferred to communicate through TikToks and random pop-up press conferences. And it was all driven by this one core belief. Authorization is an attitude. Basically, if you act like you have permission, then you do.
Okay, so let's dive into our first case study and see this whole philosophy in action. We're calling this one the Polish Fiasco, and it is a textbook example of what happens when Mumblesworth's unique vision slams head-on into the very structured, very formal world of international military cooperation.
So picture this. We're aboard the E-4B Night Watch, the Pentagon's flying command post. Mumblesworth is on his way to Poland to observe this big NATO exercise, Thunder Shield. The problem? A tiny little detail. His plane has only 20 minutes of fuel left, but the flight is supposed to take another 40 minutes. Such a simple mistake, right? But oh boy, it's a critical one.
That fuel shortage forces them to make an emergency landing right smack in the middle of a simulated invasion. Now, instead of staying put and sorting things out, Mumblesworth gets off the plane and declares a surprise inspection. This unannounced arrival of a major U.S. military asset just sparks total confusion. Allied forces, thinking this is some wild new twist in the war game, start reacting, and within an hour, a 30,000-troop exercise has completely fallen apart.
And here's the kicker. This is the crucial part. Mumblesworth's reaction, while his entire staff is seeing an absolute disaster, he sees an improvement. To him, the chaos he just created wasn't a failure. No, it was an unscheduled, real-world test of NATO's ability to handle, well, genuine confusion. He honestly believed he had made the exercise better.
And you'd think it couldn't get more surreal. But oh, the aftermath. At a congressional hearing, Mumblesworth actually compared this international incident to his car running out of gas on the way to the dentist. And he used crayon drawings on a poster board to make his point. He argued the whole fiasco was a win-win. It tested NATO, and more importantly, it gave him fantastic material for his social media, pointing to a TikTok he made of himself in a Polish tank as proof of a successful mission.
Now, if you're thinking, okay, that's just how he is on the world stage, well, think again. Let's pivot to our second case study, which shows how Mumblesworth's special brand of logic could create absolute mayhem right here at home.
So what sparked this next crisis? Something unbelievably small. During a peaceful protest in San Francisco, a police officer just slips on a wet street. That's it. But Mumblesworth, watching this live on CNN, doesn't see an accident. He sees an attack. He immediately reframes this simple slip and fall as an act of protest-induced stress and declares it a national security emergency. And in that one moment, his brain makes a leap that, well, only his brain could make. He connects peaceful protest to meteorology, and he decides that the rain itself could be a hostile act. He jumps to this incredible conclusion that protesters are somehow weaponizing the weather against the police.
So what does he do? He calls an emergency press briefing. And his choice of font? Comic Sans, with a little stick figure drawing. Just perfectly captures the absurdity of it all. He stands there and tells the press that this slip was a concerted psychological attack designed to cripple law enforcement confidence through environmental manipulation. I'm not making that up. And from this one slip, he cooks up this massive 5-step national security plan he calls Operation Umbrella Shield. And it just escalates wildly. It starts with deploying the National Guard to
help with puddles, I guess. And it ends with creating a whole new federal crime, meteorological assault. He wants to treat a rainy day like it's a coordinated military attack.
And how does he justify all this? By inventing his own brand of official-sounding gobbledygook. He uses terms like meteorological intelligence to describe, checking the weather forecast. In his world, protesters carrying umbrellas isn't just common sense, it's proof of premeditated tactical warfare.
So, okay, we've looked at two totally different situations, right? A fuel shortage in Europe, a rainy day in San Francisco. But a clear pattern starts to emerge. We can actually pull all his actions together into a coherent, if deeply flawed, worldview. Let's call it the Mumblesworth Doctrine. This doctrine really has 5 key parts. First, literally anything, running out of gas, a little rain, can be spun up into a national security crisis. Second, the story you tell is way more important than what actually happened. Third, public office isn't about governing, it's a performance. Fourth, any screw-up can be instantly reframed as a successful test. And finally, you can make any action seem legit just by inventing some new, complicated-sounding jargon for it.
So, the big question is, how does a giant established system even begin to handle a force of nature like Harold P. Mumblesworth? Well, it does what bureaucracies do best. It adapts. Slowly, methodically, it starts to create new rules specifically designed to contain his special brand of chaos.
So, after the whole Polish fiasco, the Pentagon quietly issued Protocol 47M. It's basically a rule that says a plane has to have enough fuel to actually get where it's going. It's a common-sense regulation that was only made necessary because one guy had a spectacular lack of planning.
And then, after the whole weather warfare thing, this memo popped up. It required that any mention of weather, rain, snow, anything, had to be pre-screened by the top military brass before it got anywhere near the secretary. And of course, the punchline to both of these new rules, the M. Officially, it didn't stand for anything. But unofficially, well, everybody in the Pentagon knew, it stood for Mumblesworth.
So, what's his lasting legacy? Well, it's this weird mix of the deadly serious and the completely absurd. NATO literally created a new drill for something called unexpected VIP management. At the same time, protesters started selling tactical weather gear umbrellas for charity, and Mumblesworth himself, his social media following actually grew. He definitely made a real impact, just not always the one he intended.
So, we end with this question. The Mumblesworth files are, of course, a satire, but they leave us with a really serious thought. They show how systems and rules are often built not for the 99% of sensible situations, but to protect against that 1% that is utterly strategically chaotic. And it forces us to ask, what are our own systems really prepared for?